You're welcome back. This is The Sages. My guest is the ever distinguished Professor Akilagpa Sawyerr, and you choose what you want to describe him because he's a man of many parts. What I didn't say to you early on is that there's a history, and I read it somewhere, that he even joined a band, the dreadful, how do you call it? The dreadful, I've forgotten the full expression for it.
Grateful Dead.
Grateful Dead. But that's an interesting thing. I didn't know that. So which instrument were you were singing?
I should correct that immediately.
Yes.
I did not play with the Grateful Dead.
Oh, okay.
But I was at the University of California in Berkeley, and we had street ceremonies and events. And they were playing, before they became world famous, they were playing on the street for all of us.
Oh, I see.
And I asked if I could join them and play the bongos.
Ah.
And they said, okay. By the time I was through with my first round, they were so enthused that for the rest of the afternoon, I played with them on the bongos.
Oh, I see.
I was never part of the band.
Oh, you did not officially join?
No.
But you actually played with the band.
Yes.
That's an interesting development. Many would have thought that some of your academics rarely have that kind of interesting side.
Well, I used to play in the band as well at the University of Durham, an African band.
Well, that doesn't sound much like you anyway. But
there you are.
Yes, that must be a very pretty useful and interesting. You were, however, having a conversation about the University of Ghana when you were Vice Chancellor.
Yes.
And unlike what we see in our politics and in our space most of the time, when people appear to have divergent views with not only the appointment, but people in office, they alienate them. They separate them and they only, as we call it, rule with just a section of society or whichever grouping they find themselves. You did not do that at the University of Ghana.
Well, no, I did not, because the University of Ghana isn't a place for one person to decide everything, by definition. Also, there were major problems, as I said earlier, we're dealing with.
Infrastructural problems.
Infrastructural,
the
budget.
Staffing issue. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it wasn't time to start doing personal things and picking fights. You were busy making things work, and you used the most able people to do it. And so it wasn't simply a matter of not bury a grudge. I had no time to worry about that. There were enough problems. And luckily, those people as well, as I said earlier, were willing to overlook their unhappiness with an appointment for the university's interest.
So they came around soon?
Came around, and we worked from that point on, no problem.
I've heard from others about your achievement, but if you had to single out the most important one during your time as Vice Chancellor, what would it be?
I will probably link it in a general sense with the being able to manage the relation between government and the university. Under the PNDC, remember.
Why was that important?
Critical. Because the university had elements in it which were awkward for the regime.
Okay.
Students, even lecturers, who were doing things that the military regime, remember, it was a military regime, didn't like. But that's one part of it. The other part of it was that life was very hard in those days, the middle 80s. And students have been used to being dependent upon government support. In those days, it was a free education, free meals, free everything. So as the government became harder up, right, they were squeezing the university more and more.
Depriving the people of what they previously used to enjoy.
Absolutely. So the students had all manner of complaints against government.
Oh, I see.
That's one. There were also workers' problems with government as well, overpay. The point I'm making,
of service then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is that part of the job of the Vice Chancellor is to protect the university and defend its right to autonomy against everybody, including government.
I see.
But not easy at the best of times.
Mm.
And against a military government which was used to doing things its own way, it was very tricky. And I think one of the things for which I am most grateful was that I was able, because I had contacts in government, as well as enemies in government, as well as friends, and I had the students' confidence. I was able to help to manage the very rough times until for 1988 or so, when governments got so angry that they announced on radio that the university should be closed that day by 7 o'clock.
Really?
And police cars came up, led by an armored car with lights flashing. Pew, pew. That morning, we've been to the PNDC because of the problem with the students, explaining to government that sometimes students demonstrate on campus. We let them do it. They break for lunch and go home. So often it's best to not interfere with it.
So it will naturally come to its course.
They were not happy with it. So on our return to campus, we saw this situation. We had to move immediately because it was very clear that no matter how right you are, when students and police clash, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So we had to do whatever we could to prevent the clash. We would argue the case afterwards, we would challenge government afterwards, but for now, empty the campus. Can you imagine? Students who some of them were in town in Accra, had to come back and pack and so on.
Yeah, before they go.
With a very tolerant help of the commander of the unit that came on campus, I forget his name, the police commander. We told him, look, let's clear the campus. You stay out of it. So the police stayed in their trucks.
All through.
And we used all the lecturers and everybody to clear the campus. We were able to do it by 7 o'clock. But I'm saying this because had we not been able to manage that problem,
it escalated into a serious crisis.
Rouse happens, police shoot somebody, and so on.
Other students from other campuses join in.
Absolutely.
Because a student has been killed. And it becomes a
even now, they still join in anyway.
Yeah.
You know. Another example was when the government dismissed the SRC leadership.
Government dismissed?
From the castle.
Oh, okay.
Now, of course, that was completely illegal and improper. But they dismissed them.
So still the military government, really?
Military government, all military.
Okay, well,
no.
Yes.
All military. So we met government and explained to them. When I say we, I mean all three universities, Cape Coast, Kumasi, and Legon, vice chancellors, and our chairpersons went with us. In the end, long story short, we agreed with the government that the student leaders will live off campus. But we insisted that they were not dismissed. They are still students, they can attend lectures, and they can write their exams. They didn't like it too much, but in that we were good in the end. So that's what I'm talking about. We could have said, no, you can't dismiss students, and then there'll be trouble.
Then there'll be another chaotic scene.
Or giving, and then they control the university. We didn't do that.
Okay.
We managed it. So they say government's face. Students are still dismissed. But the students did not suffer.
That requires a lot of tact. Because these are like almost two hostile tribes.
Absolutely.
That you have to be almost like a translator in between.
Difficult.
It certainly must have been difficult.
Very difficult.
Now, over the years, of course, I mean, student activism itself is comatose, to describe it with a nicer word, actually. What has happened? Is it a reflection of what society has become, or there's fundamentally a problem with the human beings that came up later on? Or your kind have stopped imparting the right kind of information or knowledge into the heads of these students?
I'm always very slow to diagnose problems like this because clearly there's a social basis for all of this. I don't know enough to know the specific factors, but I do know that the campus atmosphere, from what I can see from the distance, has changed dramatically in all kinds of respects, including the concerns of student bodies and so on compared to our time. I don't want to judge. I don't know enough. There are those who are in it who know. Let them decide. All I can say is that it's not like it used to be.
That's actually what people have a difficulty with. More recently, people have raised concerns that we know what's happening in Israel. We know what's happening on the continent. We know what's happening even in Ghana. We've been through a domestic debt exchange, went for an IMF program. These were areas that student leaders were actively involved with, not just their school fees, to be fair, not just what were their conditions on campuses and stuff like that. Have they become more inward looking or more have they prioritized their immediate environmental issues over what they used to represent in times past? Do you understand too?
You should be telling me.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I observe it.
I think that, yes.
In wonderment. But I don't understand it. And I'm not going to pretend to understand it.
Wow.
I'm not current.
There is another related development though. The quality of education we are providing at the tertiary level. Of course, over the years people have complained. More recently, there's been a lot of complaints. In fact, on one side, employers have difficulties with the graduates that are coming out. They tend to compare them to those of yesteryear and get the conclusion that these ones appear, they use the term half-baked. And students on the other side have their own complaints about contact hours. They also have their own complaints about research materials, even in the Internet of World stages that we find ourselves today. You have talked about the difficulties with restructuring University of Ghana at the time. Why does it appear that the quality has gone down more recently?
As you can appreciate, I'm not very comfortable making these judgments.
Yes.
Mainly because there have been such dramatic changes in all parts of our life, including the campuses.
Okay.
That you should be very careful not to jump to conclusions too quick. For example, when I left the University of Ghana in 1992, the total population of the University of Ghana on campus, not the Accra College, on campus, was, if I remember rightly, between 4,000 and 5,000.
Oh, yeah.
Total.
Oh, I see.
Total.
The entire University of Ghana, wherever you find yourself.
Total. There was pressure to increase the numbers, but we resisted it. We would only increase the numbers if we can expand the capacity to accommodate more students. If we couldn't, I wouldn't admit more students. That was the kind of thing we had. The notion then was to admit enough students given the carrying capacity of the university facilities, laboratories, and in those days, even the residences. Now I see the numbers have gone from 5,000, 6,000 to, I don't know, something.
Somewhere about 40,000.
And more.
Yeah.
Without too much expansion, I don't think, of the facilities and the staff. Now, once you have that problem, it's different already.
Of course, it affects quality.
Absolutely. That isn't the whole story. I'm just saying that some things are obvious. And I see also outcomes from the university which make me wonder a little bit about quality. I won't say more than that.
That's an interesting development. Is it to do with just the student quality or the quality of research materials?
As I said, I'm not going to be making judgments
I
on
get
the
your
basis
point.
of just impressions.
Now, there's a related development though, and there's a reference that was made to me some time ago that you did talk about the difficulties with having not only structural or infrastructural difficulties, but funding, with attracting the right human resources and all of that. You mentioned these ones.
Mm-hmm.
The point though is that people feel through some ingenuity you got together a proper plan, which included Codestra.
Mm-hmm.
How did that work out?
Right. It wasn't me that got Codestra. It was Codestra whose presence showed up here.
Okay.
And that's an extremely important part of our history. Codestra is the Council for the Development of Social Research in Africa, Codestra, based in Dakar.
Mm-hmm.
It brings together social science researchers and scholars from all over the continent. And its critical role was that during the 1980s, in particular, when funding for research on our campuses all over the continent was very tight, where key lecturers were leaving their countries for greener pastures.
Okay.
Codestra provided a continental venue for bringing together social science scholars of all generations from all parts of the continent. One, and raising enough funding from outside to enable us do research and conferences and keep academic life going. That had two main consequences for me at the time. One was it closed the gap.
Okay, yeah.
By providing some venue for scholars to keep on being scholars on the continent. But also, very significantly, it brought us together continentally. So I knew researchers from South Africa, from East Africa, from North Africa, from wherever, together. So Codestra's function was not only to provide funding and support for researchers going on, but to bring together scholars from the continent together.
Okay.
It was, for me, the most significant contribution of Codestra.
That's interesting. Do we have similar structures? Is Codestra, I mean, I've seen a building like that, named like that in Legon. I don't know if they are still that functional or this, so they're operative even today.
Right.
I frankly have no idea.
Neither have I.
But for how long did they play such a role during your tenure and your time at Legon?
Before my time and after, throughout. When I was president for 19, whatever it was, I forget. I helped in getting the Ghana connection going.
Okay.
Because there are some very active Ghanaians in Codestra. And they earned the right to have the grants and the support for the institution. It was Anyidoho, Tichua Menu, and more recently, George Chikata, who became president. And so of Codestra. So there's a very strong Ghanaian history there.
With Codestra at the score.
Yes.
There are things you point out which are quite clear, which still becomes an issue. Funding tertiary education. It's an age-old problem. I'm not sure whether we have ever gotten grips of it. I mean, from the times where students virtually ate free and people demonstrated over chicken and all of the other things they have said in times past, True to the times where there was a demand on students and families or parents or whichever people to contribute to it, and the cost-sharing plans of the period, due to a time that students now feel that they are overburdened with fees and all of that, regardless of the fact that they're not still paying, especially in most of our public universities, for tuition. Will we ever have a sustainable plan for tertiary funding?
Well, I mean, that is a matter of policy and realism. I remember the time when Legon, like Cape Coast and Kumasi, had not only students feeding in halls, but being served with waiters in uniform and so on.
Oh, I see.
For free. That was a luxury of the old days. In my time, there was a reduction of that. And I recall during my tenure as vice president, where government withdrew funding for feeding altogether, as I remember. And I remember going around the campus with Professor Bennett, who was my Pro-Vice Chancellor, and seeing students who would get their food and then go and sit under a tree, and I felt terrible. So we decided to use some of the funding that we had to provide 1 meal a day, I think it was lunch or something, at table, with knives and forks. So the students could at least sit down for a meal with their colleagues once a day. Government was very happy about it in government, that we kept it going because we felt that that provided part of the shaping up of the students going forward and out into the world. It didn't last very long.
It didn't last?
No. After my time, in fact, by the time I was leaving already, there was pressure to stop even that, and it stopped.
Because you were spending too much on it?
It cost too much in terms of, and I can understand the problem.
But that's just a meal a day.
I know. But meal and staff and so on, in place of a lab equipment, it was no easy choice. I don't blame government for making a choice. I'm saying that it was an expensive choice and we were able to resist it for as long as we could. But I see the problem, of course. It's a big problem.
Will we ever get around it?
Likely not.
How? Why?
Where's the revenue coming from?
Funded by government.
What do you give up? No, government itself. What does government give up in order to provide that?
Okay, that's an interesting point. As in, what we must let go? What will be the exchange point here? What will be sacrificed for providing the kind of education? But is it not because this is an investment to the people, the future of the country?
Well, you make a judgment, which is constant. With limited resources, what do you spend the money on?
Okay, I get you.
I mean, I have my opinion, but that's an opinion, and I can recognize other opinions equally valid as opinions.
So what do you think?
I don't think.
Oh,
honestly, it is too complicated for me to. I mean, take Legon with 50,000 students now who can't even find accommodation on campus. Who are listening to lectures from outside the classroom already. What do you give up in order to feed them? What do you sacrifice in order to provide feeding? I don't know. I don't know enough.
Maybe it's not feeding. It's for example, reducing the amount they are paying.
Absolutely. Whatever. But what do you give up for that? That's what I'm asking. It's a judgment call, isn't it? We shouldn't be too simplistic about it.
Okay.
We can express our preferences, recognize the cost of our preferences. Not make a simplistic either or.
Either or.
That's my own position, you know. Difficult situation.
The content of our education, is it properly positioned? We have at the lower levels done a lot of redesign. Of course, we're going through educational reform over the years. more recent, we've done a lot of redesign with the curriculum and all of that. Our curriculum, does it address the most important things that anybody should be addressing in training anybody to be a modern 21st century Ghanaian?
I don't know. I haven't studied it. I don't know. What I do know is that the appearance one gets is that we're not thinking sufficiently closely and tightly about policy in education.
Okay.
We are getting all manner of initiatives popping up, how they link to other bits, how they link to the whole system, where it's going. I'm not sure it is carefully thought through. For me, that is the main problem. A coherent, thought through policy for education from the kindergarten to the university and beyond, one, to the costing of the process, realistically. Three, the choice making, what to emphasize where, and if we have X, Y, and Z, what to do with it and so on. I don't think it's been done sufficiently.
Really?
So we get initiatives.
An entire ministry for it.
Absolutely. An entire government
Yes.
behind it.
Ministry that takes up a chunk of our budget with so much money going in there.
I know, I'm just saying what I observe.
Maybe if I drill down to asking you your thoughts on our flagship. Ghana's current flagship is free SHS.
Yes, I knew you were going to ask that question.
Because, I mean, you're a Marxist, so you support it 100%.
No.
Isn't that strange?
No, but that's the whole point. The notion of free education is a laudable one. But the pursuit of that objective without costing, without working out the lines of movement, without working out the impact on other parts of the economy very carefully, for me, it's a failure of policy, not the objective. The notion that my children under this system could go to a boarding school and get free food, free everything, right? Free fees, not everything. When there are other students, younger students, under trees, how does that make sense? I can afford to pay for my children's boarding and so on. I would like it, but I can afford to pay. Why do you give me that concession when the budget that you use for that could support people who don't have the basic desks to sit on? And that can affect who goes for university education, yes. For secondary school education, I beg your pardon. Because some can't afford it without help. So give them help. You know what they call means testing.
Yeah.
Who can afford to pay and who cannot afford to pay. It requires a lot of work, I agree. But we can do enough means testing to know those parents who can't genuinely afford to pay. And let those who can afford to pay, while those who can't, don't. It's not easy. But that's a track I would explore. But a blanket free education for everybody, when you can't afford it, not only for me is bad policy, it's just unintelligent, to put it bluntly.
Quite blunt. I mean, but government disagrees fully.
Absolutely.
It doesn't believe that there should even be a review of it.
Absolutely.
In fact, the only concession government has made so far for anything close to a review is on the instigation of the IMF. The government says all our flagship programs are under constant review now on the instigation of the IMF. Some say we make so many choices as a state And that if it is the choice of this state to single out secondary education and say no monetary hindrance should prevent anybody from going to school, that is a bold decision by state.
Mm-hmm.
And states should be able to fund that, no matter whose ox is God. That certainly must make sense to you.
Except that being done, those who are denied resources for what they are doing say, why not me? Why not the fitters?
Okay.
Why not the farmers in some place or other? What are the flood victims elsewhere? What are the students under trees? What are those without hospitals? They don't count?
And that's an interesting point I'm not sure has been explored by state because the resources are finite, right?
Absolutely.
And with scarce resources, you allocate in such a way that you do not...
You optimize the
yes,
benefits across the board.
You consider the best use possible of the resources available.
Yes. And for me, the worry is that I've not heard any intelligent defense of the SHS in this form, given the points I have made.
Okay.
You're either for or against it.
Yeah, I mean, basically.
Which is ridiculous. I can be for parts of it with improvements. Why not? Or be against part of it without improvement, and so on. But the point is, you make it very important, and that is the unwillingness to accept comment and criticism in terms of making things work, not simply who said, you or me, but the issues are here. Here are the equations. We make choices as intelligent, well-meaning Ghanaians. Of course, once you get the political sphere, there's a whole difference.
Yeah, of course, it's reduced.
And I'm not there. But it seems to me that if you are making policy at that level, on this scale, you can't afford not to listen.
Permit me to take you out of education.
Thank you.
Because for most of this, the way you said that, thank you, it sounds interesting. For most of your life, you've lived half of it not necessarily teaching. Of course, after becoming Vice Chancellor and leaving, you went back to the law faculty.
That's right.
You must be so interested in impacting so much knowledge to people that even after retiring as Vice Chancellor, anyway, because you're a younger Vice Chancellor, anyway, so you went back to teach.
Yes.
What influenced such a decision?
Well, that was one of my naive expectations.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because I found my time as Vice Chancellor very fulfilling in its own way. But that's not the life in which I wanted to live. The classroom was and remains for me the place to be. I love my students and the work of working with them. And I miss that terribly as Vice Chancellor. So I didn't complete my second contract. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
I'm probably the only Vice Chancellor in our history who resigned in the middle of my term. But that was because I couldn't go on beyond 7 years, you know. Miko classroom.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, you are at the top.
Absolutely.
You were in charge of the university.
Absolutely.
You lived in that comfortable bungalow behind the registry.
Yes.
And you thought all of those, if you like call it perks and largesse of office, you needed to abandon it to go and teach again.
I never even thought about it.
You never thought about it?
It was very clear.
This decision didn't have family support.
Absolutely.
Really? A family sat and agreed?
No, I didn't ask them. But they didn't object.
They didn't object?
No. They understood it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, because in all fairness, it sounds like what most of us will not do.
No. But it was the first time it was happening.
And you're not even completing a term. It's not as if anybody's sacking you.
Actually, let me tell you a secret. In those days, you got a 5-year term, renewable. So at the end of my first 5 years, I was offered the next 5-year term. And in accepting the offer, I put in a clause for the chairman's attention that I will not complete the term.
Oh, really?
Before accepting it, in writing. but that I'll give notice and quit. So it wasn't something which just happened. I had had enough. I wanted to get out and get to what I want to do, the classroom. It didn't work. As it turned out.
When you say it didn't work,
Yes.
why didn't it work? Because they couldn't treat the vice chancellor as one of the lecturers.
That's the point. Something wasn't right about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried to be like an honorary person willing to lecture as appropriate.
Yes.
But the system, we were uncomfortable. Instead of getting it didn't work. So after a year,
They could not write a query to the former vice chancellor, who is now one of our lecturers. The dean, clearly, who cannot be.
well, if I was dean, I would, but that's another matter.
Okay, you would have been able to do
but
so.
it was awkward.
Okay.
I understood it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so after a year, I went off for study leave, and then when I came back, I went to the AAU.
Okay, the Association of African
Universities, yes.
Interesting development. Now, the conceptualization of your being, and of course, you spend so much time in academia, so that's why I said I wanted to move you out of education.
Right.
At what point did you gain this extraordinary competence as a negotiator par excellence? At what point did it become so obvious that if you need somebody to deal with the most difficult decisions and discussions of state, which you cannot handle properly, you needed to call Akilagpa Sawyerr?
Yeah. Well, let me disabuse you of any such claim.
Okay.
I led the government team that negotiated the VACO agreement,
Yeah.
renegotiated,
Which year was this?
1983 to 85, and again 87 to whatever.
The first time.
Right, that's
it
the
was
pa-
proud
paper.
to you becoming vice chancellor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm. I was still living in Papua New Guinea, as I said elsewhere, minding my own business.
Yeah.
But I was invited back to join the team to negotiate the agreement because we had opposed the agreement when I was on campus. My students, all of us and so on, raised issues about it. And others had also raised the issue, at the senior level.
I mean, VACO aluminium smelter.
The smelter,
Yes.
which was using the power from Akosombo Dam.
Akosombo.
The problem we felt was that they were paying less than you are paying for electricity and making a huge profit out of it. So how can that be? And so on and so on and so on. So that was the debate before I left the country. So I was called back by the PNDC government to help with the negotiation. It was only when I got here that I knew I was going to be the leader of the team.
Okay.
Now, let me be clear on this. I had never ever done any negotiation in my life before that.
At the time.
Zero.
But you have studied it.
I was not an economist. I was not a power engineer. I was like you and everybody else. And the interesting point was that my team members were no different. None of them was an expert in negotiations with a record. No. They were young lecturers and assistant lecturers and so on. But very bright and very committed.
Key.
So the two things which we brought to the team was smartness and preparedness to work like hell and total honesty and commitment to the government.
But you were going up against an established
I'm coming to
institution.
that. So what that meant was we were beginning with a handicap. But luckily for us, work had been done already in preparing the material, some of it. And the UN CTC, the United Nations Committee on Transnational Corporations, and the Commonwealth Secretariat had given the government consultants who were doing initial work before we came in. So by the time the team took shape, there were documentation here and there, records here and there, already got. But the key work had to be done by the team with consultants and help. And so this young team was the one who did all the work.
I see.
I used to come back from Papua New Guinea before negotiations. We'll correspond, and so, but I'll come to Ghana, and the team will go on retreat for a week at the VRA premises in Akuse and Pong, going through everything, checking things, doing homework. The amount of work we did, the young team, was incredible. So when we started the negotiations, we were handicapped. We didn't know everything that we needed to know. But we knew enough to know where we were starting from. And as the work went on, we learned more. We learned so much that the VALCO side had to bring more and more senior people every time they came.
Yeah, because
the level was going up.
Mm-hmm.
We could match them boot for boot, as they say.
As they say now, yes.
Or even showdown.
Okay, so yeah, if you give us a showdown.
We gave them a showdown. But the point was that my team of young people were committed enough and learned enough quickly enough to develop positions which we could defend not only against the VALCO team, but beyond them to the industry and to the World Bank and so on, that there was merit in our position. It's an amazing, amazing thing.
Is that why they reference it a lot?
Yes.
Is that why it's become like an industry standard or government-wide standard of a sort?
Yeah. It was remarkable. I mean, when you look, in all these things, let me say immediately that I'm saying this now looking back.
Okay.
We didn't think in those terms.
Okay.
We had a job to do, we just got on with it.
But you were committed people.
Oh, absolutely.
When you're doing such negotiations with big companies, big aluminium, and people who had experienced for God knows how long, of course, attempt to influence you or even take out of the team people to of that. Our first that would have been necessarily made.
In fact, let me say that that is one of the strongest points we had. And it was common in those days under the Rawlings regime in the early part. My team wasn't the only ones that were committed, to be honest. You could trust them with information. Nobody could reach them like, no, none of
Try and get information out of them.
And therefore, part of our success was exactly on that basis. And I'll give full credit to my colleagues on the team for their devotion to the country, their preparedness to work hours, and their total honesty in the task.
For what exactly?
Nothing. They were not getting anything. They were not getting. They couldn't even buy goods that were offered, and yet they took no penny from anybody.
Wow.
To do the work. It's incredible. That spirit. If we had that spirit a little bit today, we would be where we are now. Take my word for it. They sacrificed and put in top class. And this is not a matter of me saying it. They met industry giants.
At least what's written of it backs this claim.
Head to head at the table. It wasn't a matter of waving the gun and say, Rawlings would. No, just argue your point. At one point, we sacked them. The team came. We had a good meeting the previous session and began to make some progress together. They had the second thought when they went back and came back with a whole different perspective, negating all that had been done.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That sounded unconscionable.
No, it's the way you negotiate. You bullet them.
Okay.
And we took a look and said, no, these principles we're working on with you, those represent our position. You go with them, we negotiate. You don't go with them, you can go home. Not only go home, we are closing the negotiations. It's finished.
For those who do not understand, this negotiation was about how much we were selling electricity to them.
That's one part of it.
Okay.
There are many parts.
I see.
But essentially, it was written at a time when the main focus of Kwame Nkrumah was to get the dam built. And to get the dam built in those days, you required to have a purchaser of the power you're going to produce on contract. So before you can borrow money to build the dam, you must show customers who can pay.
Who can pay for it?
To vouch for the loan amortization. So we had to have a purchaser of power. And the aluminum industry, unlike most, is mainly power consuming. They use loads of power and pay for it. So getting Valco, that is Kaiser Aluminium, to invest in Valco was critical to our getting funding, loans, to support the power agreement. So Nkrumah was prepared to give away all the benefits to get the power at Kosovo. And that's how we got Kosovo to this day.
So my conversation is with the very distinguished Professor Akilagpa Sawyerr. We just ended the education part and had just geared into one of the most interesting things that when we talk about Ghanaian ingenuity and competence was displayed. That's the Valco negotiation. And I want to tell me part 1. Because I understand there was part 2. Yes. So Valco negotiation part 1. And the commitment of the young people who had actually, who he led in this all-important pursuit at the time. And it's fascinating, of course, to hear things like that. For people, and we in the Republic of Ghana today sometimes are unsure whether we have people who can do that on our behalf, whether they go with our interests at heart, whether some of the deals we've had in recent times are in the best interest of the country and the people that did that. Yes. Or even the raw level, whether we have competent people enough, qualified people who are representing us at these levels.
Yes.
Prof, as coming back to you, I mean, of course, at the time you said you were not sure that it was that monumental. When you sit back and reflect on it, what made your crop of negotiators unique?
Well, I think it's important to broaden the discussion a bit, because from all accounts, other teams of Ghana at that time were doing equally brilliantly.
Okay.
For instance, all my friends told me then and maintain now that the government team that negotiated the IMF arrangement, Kwesi Botwe, Joe Abe, Tachu Chikata, were almost feared in Washington. Although we were looking for money, they went there so prepared that the World Bank people of the record will tell you about the tremendous competence of the people who came. Yes. So it wasn't just the Valco team. There was a generation who were operating under conditions of government, which enabled them to achieve amazing things in all kinds of areas, not just in these 2 areas.
At some point in this conversation, I may ask you, what went wrong? that question is absolutely important. But then, I want us to fast forward to Valco Part 2, because why was there a need to do a Part 2 anyway?
Well, that is something which I wasn't involved in directly, although I came upon it indirectly.
Yeah.
That is the sale of Valco plant.
The plant itself.
To Ghana. I came to, how shall I put it, deal with this problem as chairman of the Volta River Authority in 2009, I think, under President Mills. Because Valco, the Valco company, which Ghana had bought, was paying less for power than ordinary citizens were paying. And they were not paying.
Even when they were paying far lower than what we, the people, were paying, they were still not honoring their obligations.
They owed money month after month, after year, unpaid. And there was a rule in the VRA that if you don't pay the rates or the fares or whatever for 2 weeks, we'll cut you off.
Really?
And talk, yes. Never applied. So here was a VRA losing money, not just VACO, in all kinds of areas. So we said enforce that rule now. So we wrote to GRIDCO, which is the agency for distributing the power. See, VRA produces the power, supplies to VACO through GRIDCO. So GRIDCO determines who gets it, and they pay GRIDCO and then to VRA.
Okay.
So in order to cut them off the supply, we have to give instructions to GRIDCO, copy to them. We did. Guess what happened? The minister overruled us.
The Minister
of Energy or whatever.
Okay.
By telling GRIDCO, not us, GRIDCO not to cut VACO off. Anyway, that was one part. So they were piling up debt they couldn't pay. We were piling up debt we couldn't pay for that reason. So I called the VACO people for a meeting. What is going on? That was when I found out how the sale of VACO took place. From the person who was there with whoever gave VACO away. What I can tell you is that there was no negotiation of the sort we're talking about. Zilch.
Really?
None. No team set to work, no papers in advance, consultations, zilch. How it happened, why, don't ask me. And it got to a point where even tracking down the paperwork on the VACO company was a problem.
The company that had been there for God knows how long.
Because the Registrar General's office, at the time of our inquiry, had the old VACO on their books.
Really? Is that all strange?
This is years after the sale. So we tried to track down the documentation, never got it. But that's not my business.
No, I get your point.
I just saw it.
A bit strange, isn't it?
See, you were asking about how things are done differently?
Yes, yes. And well, so what did you have to do then?
Nothing. I was VRA and worked through GRIDCO, and the minister had told them, don't stop supply. We couldn't do nothing whatsoever.
I see.
I'm not quite sure if you are paying now, but you can check.
Occasionally they had their...
You are the media person.
check. Oh, well. But, I mean, idea initially, good idea. Have an off-taker of sort. Have somebody who's going to actually be the ones who use the electricity. Then becomes an albatross along the line.
Because if you were doing it properly, you would assess the equipment and their systems, which were built in 1962 or 3 or whatever. Here we are now looking at it in 2011, 2012, 28, 208, 206. Is it, why are they leaving?
There must be something wrong.
No, but why are they leaving? What's the market like now?
Yeah.
In the old days, you had aluminum was a key metal for production purposes. But as time went on, plastics came to replace in part.
Yeah, most probably.
So maybe the market was different. You do the homework in advance to enable you determine what to pay.
That's true.
I saw no record whatsoever of anybody doing this kind of legwork prior to the sale. If they happen, somebody should show me at some point. I'll be happy to look at it.
And this was a representation for and on behalf of the state.
Absolutely. And it's gone. And since then, no follow-up.
Wow. Now, I mean, you were not only dealing with aluminium and its related issues, or largely power, let's be fair.
Right.
You were also along the line our knight in shining armor when it comes to mining agreements. I recall there's a committee you actually had to really go and negotiate very difficult agreements of state for a long time. How did that come about?
It's important to minimize my role because I get a bit uncomfortable when that happens. But there was a mining agreement with Newmont, which was concluded in 2006. The terms were not very good. And the problem was that government was told by the Minerals Commission at the time that the terms were not very good. But they still signed it. And it contained...
That's almost like expert advice.
No, professional advice.
Yes, from
that's
the Minerals
Commission.
Commission.
Minerals Commission ignored. An expert group gave advice, ignored. I don't know why. I don't know what the grounds were. So that agreement took effect. And in 2006, it was signed. The gold price shot up into the sky after that. But the terms of the agreement had the effect that government's take from the agreement was very limited. So even as the metal price went up and the profits went up, our take was limited. And it was so bad that President Mills talked to the president of the company, who agreed to renegotiate. It was clear that something wasn't right. So I was then invited by the government to lead a very competent team again to renegotiate the agreement and get it back to some semblance of equity. Yes, that's what it was.
Was it a difficult task?
Yes, but doable. Again, competent colleagues on the team, hard work. Took us about a year, 2 years. But we got an agreement, which wasn't what I would write on day one. When you renegotiate, you don't begin from scratch. It was the best we could get
at the time.
The problem was, I don't know if you know, at the same time, well, right after, another agreement was signed by government with another mining company, Goldfields, which was terrible. That was not by us. My team wasn't involved in that.
Oh, okay.
No.
Just when you were trying to sanitize one, there was one in the offing that was equally terrible.
We just finished sanitizing it.
Yeah.
And then this thing came up. It came up before us, actually. But we were renegotiating. So we couldn't introduce a new agreement.
Okay.
So we told the company, go to the ministry, put a proposal to them, and then it can be considered. We were expecting that then they will invite us to sit down with the company and negotiate. No, we're not called. Went straight ahead and did something else. In the end, the terms were not what I would have done. Anyway, but that's me, not them.
At the core of this is a fundamental question. It's our resource. It's our natural, predominantly resource. We end up getting very little from it. That question, the answer to it has always been, well, you're not investing in the drilling, all the other things they do to get the resource out of the soil. How come we are always, and people use the word shortchange, in these deals?
Right, yeah. Well, two or three things. First, the AU, African Union, has now adopted what they call the African Mining Vision, which attempts to help us think through and solve these problems. Nobody is using any of that.
Really?
Have you heard about it?
No, I've heard as a policy direction.
Exactly, but
being discussed and being talked about, but I don't know whether states who are supposed to be involved in this are not using it.
No. Secondly, and very significantly, at the end of our negotiations in 85 actually, we proposed that government set up an arrangement for keeping negotiations at the highest level alive. Have trained negotiators on government payroll prepared to help in dealing with all these matters. It wasn't taken up.
Really?
2, it is quite clear that the best results are obtained when you have technical people with expertise in the field who spend time preparing for it and negotiating it. All the bad ones we're talking about now are done with the political leadership on the team.
Okay.
There have been examples in which the president personally sat through a negotiation.
How so?
How can, it's not possible. But it happened. So the other point is the quality of our negotiations turns on the quality of negotiators. And you cannot have the situation in which political dimensions are brought in. Look, during the VACO negotiations, part of our success was because government stayed clear of the negotiations.
You had a mandate and free hand to operate.
President Rawlings himself told his ministers, keep away. And they did. So we're dealing with our own minister, Mr. Rena, who was very good in the field, was an expert himself. But most times, I reported directly to President Rawlings. The point I'm making is that he will select carefully who does the negotiation and give them their hand. And tell all political types, ministers, keep away.
To stay off.
Stay off. And they stayed off. Today, I'm not sure how it works. What I've seen is ministers, chairman of commissions and so on, being the negotiators.
Directly leading them.
I don't think that's the way to do it, but that's my opinion.
Now, there are two key issues. First, some say is the rebellion of the people against the misuse or abuse of their natural resources. That's why we have illegal mining on our hands. That's one argument to it. The other section says is the failure of state. That's why we have illegal mining on our hands. When you think through that particular issue carefully, we are almost unable to fight it.
Right.
In fact, ministers have given up at a point. There are several attempts. We revamp it. In the last almost 8 years, the presidency has been put on the line. Basically, every single declaration has been made in that direction. But we understand that about 3 million of our young people are still engaged in this act.
Yes, so I hear.
Where did we go wrong?
Well, you know, this Galamsey small-scale mining thing is always confused. We should separate small-scale mining, artisanal mining, from Galamsey, which is illegal.
Illegal mining.
To begin with.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that small-scale mining, artisanal mining, old style, was brought into the formal statutory regime by the Minerals Commission when I was chairman.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because, as you know, the mining industry collapsed completely.
Yeah.
In the post-Nkrumah, Champon period, Ashadi Goldfields, nothing much. To revive the industry required a more formal arrangement. So the government established a Minerals Commission in 1985, I think, put me in charge as chair. And we began with Kofi Ansan as a very competent executive secretary and others. We decided to begin from scratch, review the entire mining arrangement and make proposals. So the Mining Act, 1986, was passed under our tenure to regularize the entire mining industry. So the revival of the industry came on the back of that. But the point I'm making is about small-scale mining. At the time, it was small-scale, small. But it was coming up. And we were concerned to regularize it so we could control it. In particular, the concern then was that the small-scale miners were using mercury in the water. And that, I gather, has a poisonous effect.
Dangerous effect on the, not only the environment, but human beings
Human
too,
beings.
actually. Yeah.
So our thinking was that if it was regularized, then we could help the small-scale miners deal with the issue of mercury pollution and so on, and other problems. Now, at the time, that was limited only to Ghanaians. Only Ghanaians could do artisanal mining, one. Two, they couldn't use heavy equipment.
Okay.
So it was really small-scale mining in those
Not
days.
excavators, not shamfans.
Absolutely. I'm saying that because what we are talking about today is different from that. And they get all mixed up.
Yeah.
No. What we are dealing with now is serious mining, not just small-scale mining. I mean, that equipment that they're using isn't small-scale. So, first, you got a situation in which heavy equipment was brought in, complicating the process 100-fold. One. Two, non-Ghanaians joined. Both of these were not part of the original formulation. And we sat down and watched this develop. It didn't happen at night in a corner.
Yeah.
It is there. No? And there are bodies whose job it is to not let it happen. There are traditional areas with chiefs who know everything that goes on in their terrain. Where are they? I'm not making judgment. I'm just simply describing
Where we all come from.
what is happening. Even as we speak, and as you pointed out, where government at the highest levels takes a position against it, it has spread
Further.
You can't ask me what the problem is. How would I know? That is our problem across the board. Where we are seeing something which is clearly improper. And it continues. And we all agree it's improper. And it continues, gets bigger. Oh.
We said we're fixing it with community mining.
Yep.
We have developed some of them across. In fact, we say we have 100 of them across the country also, or even more. Is that, to your mind, a solution?
I won't answer that question directly. If you don't diagnose your problem properly, I don't care what you propose, you can't solve it. The cause of the problem is not what you are talking about. That can't answer it. The chief who allows Shangfangs to work on the river in his place, right? Are you dealing with that or not? I don't care what you propose.
Okay.
If the people there will let it go on, right?
It doesn't matter what.
And their government up here will sit down and let it happen, right? Not once or twice. Year after year after bigger. And you are going to propose what? What was it? What?
Community mining.
Can you imagine?
Set that aside for the people who are doing the illegal mining,
That
so
was
that
the-
they can do it
That was
regulated.
the idea of the original
The definition of small-scale mining.
What we proposed, exactly that. To employ them productively. And don't forget, people don't realize this. I forget the numbers now. But a huge proportion of our gold revenue is from small-scale mining.
That's true.
Not just the bigger
Sometimes
ones.
people have actually
People forget that.
42% or so, even
Something
sometimes
like,
more.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're concerned to preserve it, want to produce, but also to give jobs and labor to people around there. That was the original idea. But the transformation in the production process, under the eyes of everybody, is a problem, isn't it? And we all see it.
Is it executive level, or this is purely a security matter that could be dealt with without the involvement of any other relevant institution beyond that? If you see crime, you arrest crime, you prosecute crime.
Yes. And if you don't, what?
You should be taken on.
By whom?
By the relevant authority that's superior to your office.
Are they doing it?
We are not seeing enough of that, actually.
So who should check that one?
Because they say that people who are supposed to be actively checking these things. We have a huge system with mining district officers at the district level.
Yes.
Which goes up to the commission itself. Then there are ministerial levels who are directly in charge. On 2 different occasions, we have formed a ministerial and a deputy ministerial committee directly in charge of this same activity, with military on board. I don't recall the last time we put military on any of our bigger problems in this country. And yet, it is persisting, even growing in bounds.
Yes.
It doesn't appear we have a solution anytime soon.
Hang on, you stop short. How does community mining stop that?
Well, they believe that when you redirect the people, they will not do the illegal one.
But the people are not the problem. The laborers are not your problem. They are the easy option. You always arrest them and so on. They are not the problem. The problem is those who are promoting the mining. And they are here with us, right here, or not?
Not in the trenches, they're actually in Accra.
Oh, absolutely. Or not?
Yes, certainly, we have been told
so. If you go to a community mining and this and that around the corner, you can do it all day long. But you have not diagnosed the problem.
That's true.
Because you choose not to diagnose it.
Oh, we choose not to do so?
Of course not. It's obvious.
You sense that there's a deliberate attempt not to fight it?
I'm saying that you're not fighting it with the eyes open.
So that's an interesting
You
perspective.
explain it to me.
Yeah.
And why they're not fighting it. All the talk, everybody agrees, no? It's still there.
Now, there's the other question though about it. So yes, at some point, like with oil, we are done for the first time and we needed new investment, so we were very malleable to whichever terms they will give us. Along the line, we do negotiations and renegotiations. But more recently, even a former Chief Justice has raised concerns about lithium deal. She's so livid that she calls it a deal that's meant for the Gettysburg period.
Yeah.
That in no modern society should any state agree to such an agreement. Surprisingly, on the other side, the state is, the minister is heavily defending this. He believes that this is the best deal we've had in a long while, not only in Ghana. He compares it to some in the sub-region too. I mean, for those of you that are appreciation of not only the law, but had negotiated the most difficult of deals, and also understand the extractive sector properly. When you hear these things, what comes to mind? Are we be shortchanged, or we are getting a good deal? Is it much ado about nothing? Or once again, our priorities as a state are not in sync with protecting the mineral resources of the state?
I have not had a chance to read the agreement and study it. So I cannot pronounce on it definitively. What I can say is to make general comments about it. Lithium is not coal. Lithium is not gold. From what I can gather, it's a very special metal. And in these days of the attempt to minimize the footprint of carbon emissions, it's a very special metal. Am I right?
That's true. Yeah, there's so much focus on it actually.
So, from my point of view, if you're going to exploit it, you must study very thoroughly the value chain of the production from mineral from lithium thoroughly. 1. 2, you must look at other countries and what they are doing over a period and why, concretely. Look at yourself to see the impact of the mining of it and the processing or not of it on you. Do all that legwork ahead of making any judgments about going forward. So when I hear the minister comparing the 10% royalty here to the 5% in gold, that is not the issue. It's not the best you could have got under other conditions.
Okay.
I don't know. But I want him to answer that. In other words, the important point is how much legwork we did and what choices we had to make.
Yeah.
What we made them. Show us that. And I'd be happy to go along with it. You understand? I haven't seen it. Just simply telling me the outcome is very good for us. No. I'm not satisfied.
Prof, I want to conclude the conversation with a more generalized one. Your reflections of this state and the conversation I've been having with you, the part I find very depressing is the fact that it appears your kind is not only rare in our republic, that we are running out of your kind. What can we do differently? What happened? How did we get into a system where we have less patriotic people who are self-serving and the state's interest or the collective interest appears to never be on the front burner?
Yeah. I'm not sure you are right about my type becoming extinct. Because it's not a personal thing as such. It's a generation thing as well.
Oh, okay.
And a time thing as well. One of the shaping of the cadres in all different fields is partly by plan, but also by conditions of life and the challenges that are confronted. I don't think my generation and my students and their students and so on were different Ghanaians from ordinary Ghanaians. But there were factors which encouraged and led and shaped thinking and practice over a period. And people draw from it as they think fit. The question to ask, therefore, is what are the preconditions which enable us across the board to make choices other than simply personal choices, party political choices, ethnic choices. People are not irrational. Something makes them make those choices. What is it? Because if you don't address those problems, they'll make sensible choices for themselves.
Greed.
Happens all the time.
It's not greed.
Well, if you want to call it that, yes. But why greed now? We're not greed 40 years ago. There was greed even then. But there was a system beyond the greed which limited its application at that time. You got to examine it. And it changes. People change as well.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right that we're in a situation now where, quite frankly, we're looking for where do we find salvation.
Certainly. Even on the economic front.
Absolutely.
17 IMF programs. And we did a novel domestic debt exchange attached to it. We appear not to be getting better, are we?
Well, even the program we are on now, we haven't met all the conditions.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yes. Will we ever get better?
I have no doubt we will get better. But when and how and through what, I don't know.
The last question is about ideology. Is it still material in 21st century Ghana? Is the ideas that shape state, of course, and I speak to government officials. I speak
Yes.
to people across the table with people who have been given state power and competence and authority, who are very bereft of ideological leanings and appear not to know or have any ideals on how proper statehood should be organized. At least be able to defend one, regardless of the ones their parties propound or propose. Is it that a period where people were dogmatic has passed? Or we just don't have competent people within our sphere any longer?
You know, one, you shouldn't personalize it. It's not a personal matter. Secondly, there is a problem with the way you formulate the problem. Because you make ideology sound like it's only on one side. You are either ideological or you are normal or you are not. Even those who purport to be just carrying on are operating within an ideology they haven't even thought about.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
I mean, quite frankly, laissez-faire. I mean, they are not. Yeah.
But that's an ideology as well. It's not,
I
it's not
agree.
an accident.
Yes, of course.
That is part of the problem we have now. What they call the laissez-faire attitude or the liberal democratic notion. The market to decide.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself, let the market decide. It's an ideology.
Yeah.
And it's shaping people's practices. They're not aware of it, they take it for granted. You shouldn't get it. They don't even examine it. They assume it is normal to be like that. And then when you raise a question, you are being ideological.
But they don't know that they are operating within the same sphere too.
Precisely. But whereas you are doing it consciously, they are doing it unconsciously. Because they haven't thought about it. It's normal. It's not normal. And quite frankly, that is the debate that needs to be had. Not as a debate, but as a struggle. This is not a matter of winning debates on paper, you know.
Yeah.
You can do that and win or lose on paper. Change nothing. It's when you get those whose interests are at stake, appreciating the need for change to advance their interests, and appreciating what needs to be done to achieve it, and appreciating who is against their doing it. Then you begin to make progress, not because you are clever or not clever, but because they then take up the struggle.
This is the beginning of a series. Just the beginning, Prof.
Okay.
And since we know where you are and hopefully can track you easily, it should be possible for us to continue with subsequent conversations on this. Okay. It's been illuminative for me. Hopefully other people find it equally exciting and interesting. But I'm grateful to you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm sure you know this is a perfect edition of The Sages. If you do not get illuminated by the competence displayed, well, you may have to wait for the next series anyway. But many thanks to you for watching this one.